Thank you very much, Dr. Kitson. Very kind introduction, a little bit overblown. I heard that there will be different accents here. I certainly am one of them. And I suspect that Montgambier has some kind of a French connotation. So I would like to know about the history of the city. I don't really know if there is a speaker that I can really use and walk. It would be good for me. Oh, yes, here? You can hear me? Yes. I'm sorry, what did you say? Wrong side. Oh, okay, it doesn't matter. It's not. Let's make it a workshop. All right. So, the topic I'm going to talk to you is really about traveling through a landscape of social accountability and essentially health equity. And we can all agree that life is truly not a straight line. It's more like a jigsaw puzzle. So most of us enter into our future really unknown where the final destination is going to be. And so, good morning, first of all. I would like to start by telling you that I started medical school not too long ago in 1962. And this was actually the official university of the Congo. Congo used to be a colony of Belgium. And we had a 7-year curriculum that was a typical curriculum that you had in medical school in Europe. Congo was also the place where my parents lived and spent their lives. They were missionaries. My father was a Protestant minister, my mom a teacher, and that's where I grew up. In 1960, well, before that, I just want to tell you that it was also a life of contradiction for them to live there, because it was a contradiction between their inner belief in racial equality and social justice, and being in a colonial system that denied human rights and political rights to the black majority. In 1960, the country became independent. And it was really a moment of euphoria that unfortunately didn't last too long, because a few weeks later, a bloody civil war erupted. Most of the colonizer who benefited tremendously from that wonderful country abandoned it and went back to Europe or elsewhere. My folks decided to stay, welcoming the end of a system that was an apartheid, and wanted really to be contributing to this wonderful new project of being part of a new independent country. When I was a third-year medical student in the Congo, one day with some of my Congolese friends, we decided, those were from the medical school, we decided to take a trip, a 2-day trip, a camping trip in the bush. And our final destination was some 4 hours on dirt road. It was an area that was beautiful, where there was a water point that was ideal for tracking wildlife. So we traveled to the dirt road. It was manned by military checkpoints, because the region was still very insecure. We were barely recovering from a civil war. When we arrived there, we established camp, and with one of my friends, we decided to skirt out the areas where the camp was. It was early evening, it was night, beautiful moonlight, silver light, and walking in the bush, we suddenly saw a young man who was observing us. This was not supposed to be, because this was a totally uninhabited area that we thought so. This man was frightened. He didn't know if we were representing a threat. We approached him, we told him who we were, what we were doing there, and en passant, we told him that we were young medical students. his demeanor changed entirely. He looked at us and he begged us to follow him, which we did. So for 30 minutes we were walking through the bush, and then we arrived to a surprising area where there were a mud house. And although it was really pretty much advanced in the evening, it looks like the entire village was up. We did our usual thing, which is we went to meet the chief to do our introduction. What was interesting is really that all the kids there were really looking at me very strangely, and they were giggling because they never saw a white man. My friend was actually a black Congolese. The chief begged us to follow him because he wanted to show us something. And we went from one hut to another, and what we saw were actually kids, women, men of all ages, appearing very ill, and some unable to move. So the only thing we could do was a perfunctory physical exam. At least we could do that. We had nothing with us. Few words of comfort, and a promise that we would go back, that we would come back. These people didn't see a healthcare professional for the last year and a half because of the insecurity. Upon return to the city, we spoke to the health authorities, we spoke to our mentors, and a convoy was organized to deliver medicine, to examine, provide care to these very poor, unfortunate people who were forgotten. This experience, I believed, left an imprint in me and my friend. We didn't realize that at that time, but I'm absolutely sure that it did. Fast forward a couple of years later, because of the Civil War reigniting and too many close calls, I went to Europe to pursue and to finish my medical school, which I did at the Free University of Brussels in Belgium. I had a dual degree in medicine, and also I went to the Institute of Tropical Medicine of Antwerp and got what was a doctorate in tropical disease and hygiene, which to a certain degree is equivalent in those days as public health, really. It was really quite an interesting time for me to grow in a colonial system. It really left a deep mark in me, because I could see that actually according to the color of your skin, it will dictate the level of education you will be able to achieve. It will dictate your wealth. It will dictate your longevity. So it was really a first-hand experience looking at really inequities. And I felt very, very, how could I say that? I was embarrassed. I thought that I didn't really know where do I belong in this thing. You know, which community do I relate to? And I believe that this sense of searching and finding an answer led me to believe strongly in universalistic values such as racial equality, justice, the force of love, respect against racism, division. It also was the reason why I discovered and really loved the language of science that transcends all those barriers and led me to enter a medical career. So at the time when I graduated in 1969, it was an exciting time in medicine. It's always an exciting time, but it was particularly an exciting time. Mind you, a year before in South Africa, because of the advance of immunology, you had a first heart transplant which was done at Groote in Cape Town by Christian Barnard. A few years before, in 1953, the first kidney transplant occurred at the Brigham in Boston by John Merrill and his group. there were a whole bunch of new advances, such as vaccines for hepatitis A, B, meningitis, polio, mumps, smallpox. It was really extraordinary. And in 1953, the very first, the discovery of the molecular structure of the DNA occurred by Watson and Crick. Wow. Young medical student that at that time saw all these changes. I want to be part of it. So an opportunity came for me, and I went to the United States. I jumped on that. And my journey was about to start in a very iconic place in New York City. That place is called New York University Bellevue Medical Center. This is where I trained in internal medicine and later on in nephrology, and I shared this with the dean of Flinders, I believe, that I heard that you are a nephrologist as well. Bellevue is an iconic place because it is the oldest public hospital in the United States. You can trace it back to 1736, when it was an infirmary. And the mission, the mandate of Bellevue was to take care of the indigent of the city. That mission, that mandate is still the same today, so that if you are destitute, irrespective of your ability to pay, irrespective of your legal status in the US, and particularly today it's not particularly good, you will be seen, you will receive quality care. That is really the mandate of Bellevue Hospital, a very unique place. It is also the teaching hospital of New York University Medical School and also the School of Nursing. And this setting presents is actually give an opportunity for clinical training that are second to none. I told you that Bellevue was the last resource for the indigent, and I want to introduce you to a patient I had. His name was Isaac Forbes, a really a striking character. Lanky, African-American, pretty tall. Mr. Forbes came from his native Jamaica in search of the famous American dream, which never materialized for him. Very soon he became homeless, had really very little education, was undocumented, had no source of income, and was surviving by street smarts. Mr. Forbes one day came to our emergency room, and he was found to have end-stage kidney disease. And as a young nephrologist, they took care of him. He was put on dialysis, and in those days, that was the early days of dialysis. Dialysis was really provided mostly in hospital settings. So I would meet him during rounds. And what was interesting is that I was living in Manhattan, not too far from the hospital. And there is, for those who are familiar with New York City, 14th Street is lower Manhattan. But in those days, that is the early 70s, 14th Street was the place where many of the homeless congregated. So every day I would really cross it. And very frequently I would bump into Mr. Forbes, who would greet me with a huge smile and was extremely proud to introduce me to his friends who were homeless. And his pride was that he introduced me as my doctor. So he was very special, and I really admired him. I called him the Prince of the Street because of the dignity that he maintained in spite of being destitute. One day, Mr. Forbes didn't show up for treatment. And we learned shortly thereafter that Mr. Forbes was found dead on the street and was actually buried in, I'm sorry, I tried to avoid the light, and was actually buried in a mass grave in an island which is actually off Manhattan, just along the coast of the Bronx. And he was put in a plot for unclaimed body. Why do I tell you this story? I really felt angry. I really felt powerless. And I felt guilty. And I felt guilty of being part of a system that failed him. And I could not really articulate this well. But all I knew was that as a young physician, trained in a traditional way in conventional medical school, trained in the conventional internship, residency, fellowship, and so on, that I was not prepared to deal efficiently or effectively with these issues that Mr. Forbes really was experiencing. So it really raised a big question, because being the last resource for the indigent, or not only the indigent, but being, we would see actually patients who would come really very much late in the process of their illness. And this could have been prevented many times. So I started really to question really what was our role and what was the system geared at. Because I was talking really, we didn't really know that, but now there is a word, of course, about social determinants of health. That's really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about these health inequities that really are generated by society. They are systemic, they are socially produced, they are preventable, and yet I think we have a responsibility because it's unjust and unfair. So that was the reason why I was angry. But besides all this, I was so happy in my academic bubble. After all, I was in New York University, which is a very interesting and an extremely good place to be trained. I was a faculty member. I had a successful research lab. I was teaching. I was providing care. I was tenured. No financial worries. The future was really beautiful. Couldn't be better. Well, everything was nice and dandy until a horrible tragedy occurred and everything crumbled. What I'm referring to is the genocide that occurred in Rwanda in 1994. For those who may remember this or those who don't, I will just give you a quick review of really what happened at that time. A civil war erupted in Rwanda, and that culminated in the slaughtering of 1 million people. Think about this, in 4 months. They were slaughtered because they were either in part of a wrong ethnic group or their political affiliations. During these 4 months, people start running for their lives. Millions of them crossed the different borders surrounding Rwanda, Tanzania, went to Kenya, Congo. And in Congo, 1.5 million refugees crossed the border. And they went to a border town called Goma. And here is a double whammy. Suddenly, one of the largest epidemic of cholera exploded. It is one of the largest ever recorded in modern history. The Congolese army pushed these poor people further inland to a volcanic plateau. Think about this, 15 miles away from the nearest water point. Massive epidemic of cholera. So it was a death trap. I was, of course, in the comfort of my academic life in New York City and looking at this on CNN. And that became really intolerable. I had a wonderful dean. I spoke with him, and he supported me and gave me some time to go and volunteer for an international relief organization called the International Rescue Committee. So I went, and I arrived there, and UNHCR allocate the area where you would really develop the relief program. And I was assigned to an area, whatever the name is, it's called Kibumba, where there were 250,000 people there. The largest outpatient clinic I ever had. When I arrived there, before arriving, the stench of death was really suffocating. People were scattered all over, stunned, emotionally stunned. You had dead bodies, you had people unable to move, a few valid people still. And in the midst of this horror, these people really, the predominant feeling was resignation, abandonment. But I also witnessed the greatness of the human spirit. 6 Ethiopian physicians and nurses came from Ethiopia. They were working in an area endemic for cholera. They volunteered, joined me, and together with the valid member of the community, we started really working 24/7. We did a rehydration program. We had to bring water. We had to have IVs. We had to distribute high-protein biscuit. We had really to distribute plastic sheeting because there was absolutely no protection against the element for these unfortunate people. We had to develop a program to trace motherless infant. We had to develop an epidemiological surveillance program. We had to bury the dead, develop latrines, build latrines, defecation field, and so on, and so on, and so on. By the time I left, we had a field hospital tent with a generator, and it was working 24/7. Of course, we got some reinforcement. Well, I have to say that I never felt more fulfilled in my life than when I was there. It was, I didn't expect that. I'm really sorry about this. So, with such an experience, going back to my beautiful hospital, my academic life was very difficult. I never thought I was an emotional guy. You know, it's probably Mongambier does that to people. I think so. So how could I integrate this experience in what I was doing before going there? It was really very difficult, and I was soul-searching. What happened was that 2 years later, I went back to the region because, again, with the support of my dean, I went to the region to assist to do actually some humanitarian work during the civil war that was raging in the eastern part of Congo, but the very same area, more or less. And there, the beginning of an answer came up through the meeting I had with an exceptional person who was covering Central Africa, Eastern Africa for humanitarian organization, and who also had witnessed and went through a similar experience. So it was really, it's easier to speak to somebody who has similar experience, of course, because those are not really necessarily experience that you get every day. That person was still working in Africa and decided that 2 years later to go back to New York City and to join NYU in 1998, I believe. And so we decided to team up. And that person, some of you know her, she's here, it's Björk Balsdotter, who is here. So together, we started really to try to act on this. And with the support of the university, I have to say that I owe a lot to NYU in that sense. With the support of the university, we realized that why don't we create here a Center for Global Health? This is in 1998, and I believe it was one of the first in the United States. Why a Center for Global Health? Because the communities that we have seen that really had access to no healthcare, no health professionals coming and so on, we still have that also in the United States. We have that in New York City. So we thought that, well, we could really now start thinking a little bit broadly and start developing programs looking at the immigrants who come to New York. After all, New York is really a magnet that brings people from all over the country. And they come with them with the consequence of inequities in their countries. No access to care, or a feeble health system, poor education, name it. So we thought that these communities in New York, really coming with all their social determinants of health, to use the terms today are there, that it was really a wonderful opportunity for us to look at the health outcomes when they come to the States, when they come to New York, and to go back upstream to their country of origin, developing partnership with organizations in their native countries or with universities. And so we developed some interesting research program. We also developed a curriculum on global health to highlight the global health issues that are not only global in their geographic scope, but they are global in terms that they are shaped by factors that we don't traditionally associate with health. So it was an exciting work, and it was also an interdisciplinary work. We mobilized different schools from NYU. We developed partnership with them, but we realized one thing. We could not stay within the confines of our academic hospitals. It was really impossible to do that work. We needed to go beyond that, develop partnership with community-based organizations, develop partnership with other sectors that affect health. That was the work we were doing. And we had really a remarkable group of colleagues. We learned a lot from them. One question that we were facing is that how could we really produce doctors, nurses, health professionals who will be agents of change, the famous agents of changes, so that they would really be prepared for a situation like I was not prepared when I came to New York. So we start really raising that question, and Björk and I at one point decided to write a grant. And the grant was to essentially answer a question. The question was, what is the academic community doing to reduce the health inequities? And are there any success stories of schools of medicine and health science that are producing these kind of agents of change, that really are working in the underserved communities, stay there, work with the communities? And this was really the beginning of an amazing trip, because we discovered, many of you, we discovered that schools of medicine and health sciences didn't really wait for call for reform that you would hear from WHO, from professional organizations and so on. think there are many calls for reforms. They were acting on it. And they were acting on it in the sense that what they decided to do, they measure their success by looking at really what is the positive impact that they can have on the communities that they serve, and also on the health system that they are part of. So without going into detail, we noticed that actually we discovered that many of these schools didn't know each other. But they were sharing similar strategies, similar approach. And they were actually socially accountable. They were using an approach which was community engagement, which is really the core of this conference here. And community engagement was really hardwired into all their activities. Research, education, service. So we put them together. We got, thanks to a wonderful foundation called Atlantic Philanthropies, we were able to bring all these schools together. And they decided that they wanted really to develop a community of learning, a community of practice together. But they were very honest. I said, well, we are striving to be socially accountable, but are we? We need really to walk the walk, so how could we measure that? And so we all together, schools, decided to develop a tool, and that is really the framework on social accountability that some of you know. The other thing is that recognizing that we need evidence to influence policymakers, it was really critical that we start doing joint research and collaborative research and be strongly advocate. So this is really how the NET, the Training of Health Equity Network, was created. It was created by 8 schools. We were very much aware that there were many other schools that really were also the trailblazers, and some of you are here actually. So Björg and I had to make a decision. And we decided that it was about time now to go to the next step. After creating the Center for Global Health, and which grew into a bigger program, we decided to leave NYU and to work full-time with the NET. It was not easy to relinquish a tenure, because of course there is a lot of comfort associated to that. But there is absolutely no regret, because you could not resist to work with the colleague that we discovered who were visionaries, dedicated, committed, and they became our mentors. So it has been a great privilege for me to work, and I can speak the same way for Björk. So to end up, I just want to tell you it has been really quite a journey from the Congo to Mount Gambier, or Mount Gambia, if you say. It is a privilege for me to be here in front of you, because many of you have made remarkable, notable accomplishments. And so I am extremely humbled to be here and to share my story with you. I think there are moments of discouragement, for sure. And I am always reminded that you cannot stay idle. You cannot stay indifferent. Particularly now, and I'm talking about the United States, but it's not only the United States, when science and scientists are under attack. When we are hearing degrading political discourse. When we hear powerful voices that spread falsehood with an astonishing disregard for facts. When you have a resurgence of totalitarian ideologies. When you have a resurgence of bigotry. When the fundamental right to health is really now being cynically dismissed by self-serving groups and politicians and ideologies. And when the poor, the migrants, the dispossessed, and we see that now particularly, are being used as scapegoats for failed policies, we are here all together as a global movement, I believe. And it's a movement about human rights. It's a movement about social justice. It's a movement about health as a fundamental right. It's a movement about health equity. And I think no one should ever be discriminated. Nobody should be discriminated because of gender, race, or whatever characteristic have been used historically to justify discrimination. So whatever system of power we are facing, we must continue to tear down the wall of injustice on behalf of all the Isaac Forbes of the world that I was telling you about. Thank you very much.
Thank you, AJ. I think that response reflects that you have touched our hearts. We now have some time for questions, and we do have a roving mic, do we? Yes, we have one. We have two, right. So while you're thinking and getting your question constructed, I have a question for you, AJ. What struck me was courage. It's the courage to speak out, and it's the courage to hold on to the values, and the courage to almost be outcast in a group, in a hegemony. Tell me how you have held on to your courage, and tell me, was there a time when you almost lost it?
That's quite a question. I don't know. I am certainly looking for sainthood. I would not qualify. So. But courage, I think, is maybe a word that we can really share here all together. I think that the conditions sometimes in which you find yourself really demand that you make a decision. And I think you might call that courage later on, but I think that it's really the strong belief that two things for me at least. One is that we have a very short time on this earth. And we need really to use it to the best we can. So I love sailing. I love doing a lot of great things. I love going to nice restaurants, so on and so. Don't take me wrong, you know. So. But I don't know if I have an answer for you. But I think it's really related to value, and I certainly was a very lucky guy to be raised the way I was raised. Maybe I could have turned a pretty bad guy. Yeah.
Well, that certainly would have helped. Wouldn't have helped the sainthood stakes. Okay, so do we have any questions? Yes.
Hi, AJ Janine here. Thank you so much. Maybe cry. It's really awesome. I'm really interested in your take on leadership, though. I'd really like to hear, because I think all of us want to be leaders, and there's different ways of being leaders, and I'd really like to hear what it was that actually helped you to lead in this kind of distributed way. It's really quite different from other people in magic.
Yes. Thank you, Janine. Another tough question, because I struggle with what is to be a leader, to tell you the truth. I think a leader is first and foremost somebody who serves. And you lead by example. And that, I think, is probably for me what the best definition of leadership is. you know, and it's not really about the differential of powers and all that. To me, it is service.
No more questions? So I'll have another one. So, oh, sorry.
Yeah, AJ, Roger Strasser here. Fantastic presentation, thank you so much. I notice in the media today, Stephen Hawking from the grave is making comments about a world where experts and expertise are being decried and diminished as a revolt against expertise. I guess I'm interested in your comment on that, because you were in one of those sort of centres of expertise in New York University, but you saw that kind of expertise and what didn't reflect what was really needed to address the health needs of the populations around the world. And so I'm interested in your thoughts about the concept of expertise and the trends that we're seeing around the world at this time.
That's a very interesting question, Roger, because we have a workshop, I think, this afternoon, and last night I was thinking about this. I was thinking about, it's really about community engagement and speaking about expertise. One of the big issues also is really, if we consider ourselves expert, we already limit the scope of really the problems we want to address. So to me, I think expertise, it's important to pursue an expertise that you feel committed to have, but expertise need to be linked with the understanding that actually it is just a tool and that many other tools are out there and we need really to link with it. So I don't know what Steve Hawkins said, because he had a very remarkable way of communicating, and so I don't really know how he communicates from where he is now, but I would like to read that, actually. But expertise is, it's a dangerous word sometimes, you know, because it really brings the differential of power when we talk about community engagement and working with communities, not for communities. Expertise is essential. Recognizing that expertise comes from, it's a 360 degree. But I think it's an extremely good question.
So my next question is, you talked about health being a universal right. As a nurse, I would say care is a universal right. And I would also say healthcare is a universal right. So we've got three ideas being blended here, health, care, and healthcare. So I would like to ask you, how does your global network begin to bring all the actors together, the community, the doctors, the nurses, the allied health, the scientists, the educators, to actually create the seismic shift that we need to make in order to get some sort of traction in this world of social injustice and health determinants?
Well, I cannot speak about my network. I don't have a network. The net is really an open community partnership and so on. But I think to get to your question, I believe that we are a global movement. We have to see ourselves as catalyzing, but we need really to have common goals. It's really important to have common goals and set up directions with all the parties. It's not just the academic institutions, because we are predominantly academics here. So it's interesting. Recently in New York, Björg and I attended two fascinating events. One was called the MIT, from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. It's MIT Solve, and the other one is WISE, I think, Björg. Yeah. these really are people from the private sector. And when we speak about private sectors, we sometimes take a certain distance because it really looks at really people who really try to make a buck and so on, what are their values, but there are a lot of very interesting things happening there. We speak about care, healthcare. We were struck by seeing the number of tools that they were developing that really are so extraordinary. And so I think, to go back to this global movement you are referring to, I think we really need to be more open. We need really to look at other sectors. We need to look at innovations for wherever they come. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, my last duty, if there are no more questions, is to thank you so much, Ajay, and please accept this on behalf of the organisers. Thank you.
Thank you.